Hello, my name is TJ Lee. I am the writer for the Sturgeon Universe for Dusklight Radio, its humble janitor, and I'm here to explain to you in under 60 seconds what we're doing here. If you've come over because of the algorithm, welcome. Normally we have these radio-style introductions by our undead host, Everett Blackwell. Those are still going to be here. However, for the next 30 days, outside of a couple of special uploads, we're going to be doing a 30 and 30 challenge to see if the algorithm responds well to daily content posting, and the aim is to show high-quality, horror-based content that you're already used to, but doing that on a daily basis. We've got a schedule all through the next 4 weeks. Vidith is also going to be doing this, and we're really excited to see how well this responds on the metrics. If you like this and you support it, all I ask is that you engage with the content, drop a like, comment, let me know your thoughts, and maybe check out the Patreon if you want to support us. It's as little as $1 a month, and we've got a Discord with a community there. Thank you so much for choosing Dusklight Radio, and I really hope you enjoyed the content. Oh, and stick around at the end because that is where we'll have our typical outros with Patreon shoutouts. Thanks. Have you ever wondered about the freedom of your decisions, and if you're truly in control of your life? As a psychologist, I often pondered these questions. They were a key concern of one of my patients, Jeremy. He was a big man, but one of the gentlest souls I'd ever met. He was soft-spoken, never lost his temper, and always apologized in case he missed a meeting. Despite his huge build, the man was terribly afraid of the outside world, suffered from a serious anxiety disorder, frequent panic attacks, disassociation, and the aforementioned feeling of not being in control of his life. During our weekly sessions, we often came to talk about the topic of dreams. Jeremy was often plagued by vivid nightmares, centered on loss, people leaving him behind, and not being able to do anything about it. One day, however, he told me about a different dream. I listened as Jeremy outlined a nightmare centered on the loss of a dear friend that had haunted him for years. "Well, Jeremy, that dream, like many others," I started, but was promptly cut off.
"No, Doc, that's not what I want to talk about."
I waited for him to continue, but for a while he just sat there. His eyes were downcast and his fidgety fingers scratched over the fabric of his dream.
"It's what comes after,"
he eventually said after taking a deep breath. "Are you talking about how you feel after waking up? The guilt?" Jeremy shook his head.
"No, it's how the dream ends. Oh, all of my dreams end these days."
"How do they end, Jeremy?" Once more he was quiet and seemed to gather himself, unsure where to even start. I wondered what had him so worked up, and why he was so anxious.
"It doesn't matter what my dreams are about. I always end up at a different place. It's a path through a wide plain, but it's unlike anything I've seen before. I know you said dreams can be weird, Doc, but this one's different. It's a path, but also not. I feel like I'm traveling through a place I can't understand. I somehow know it's a wide plain, but it's also a tunnel. Everything's upside down, but not. I feel like I'm moving in all directions at once, but also not moving at all."
Jeremy continued to describe his dream, or he tried to. I could see the frustration and the concentrated look on his face. His fingers seemed to dig into his legs as he talked about colors and forms he'd never seen before, but was unable to put into words.
"It's just, I don't know, Doc. It's indescribable, outlandish. I don't know where this is."
"Calm down, Jeremy. It's all right. At times, our dreams might not make sense, but given what you told me..."
"It doesn't end there, Doc. I wish it would, but it doesn't. Eventually, I arrive at some sort of structure. I know it's a castle or a place, but it's all wrong. The dimensions make no sense, and the walls are moving in all directions. It's like they're alive, growing from and falling into one another. I just can't describe it. After a while, I entered this grand hall, this court, and there's a banquet going on. There's all of these things, these creatures or beings. They too make absolutely no sense."
Jeremy's voice had grown erratic as he rambled on about twisted monstrosities, gaseous entities, angels, and demons. But he said those were merely words. Words his brain told him, but their shapes made no sense. They were so strange. Whenever he tried to think about them, his head hurt, because he never thought shapes like that could ever exist. For a moment, he tensed up, and I saw him rubbing his temples as if to fight an emerging headache. I watched him, ready to cut him short at any moment, afraid he'd end up having a panic attack.
These things, they're consuming something. I know it's rotten and disgusting, but I just know it. There's one thing though, Doc. One thing I can always see clearly. At the end of the hall, there's a throne, and on it sits some sort of puppet, a marionette. This damned thing. It's dressed up as a jester, grinning from ear to ear and staring right at me.
He took a deep breath, and I could see him shudder.
There's these strings leading upward from it. Countless strings, but they aren't connected to it, not controlling it. Instead, the marionette is holding something in his hand and uses it to manipulate the court to make them eat the disgusting, rotten banquet. Not just eat, to gorge themselves on it. This thing, I don't even want to think about it. My God, I don't.
Jeremy, it's all right. It's just a dream. There's no reason to...
Do you know what it does, Doc? What it always does? Every single time it comes forward, dances toward me, half floating, half walking, giggling and laughing. All the little bells on his outfit jingle and jingle and jingle. Once it reaches me, it pushes its face right in front of mine. Its giant, grinning face. Its eyes are so wide and they stare deep into mine, and I can feel them. I can freaking feel the strings all over my body. Right then, the damned thing whispers something. But before I can hear it, I woke up. Sometimes, even after waking up, though, I can still feel them. I can still feel those strings, and sometimes I...
Jeremy was shaking and completely out of it. For a moment, I thought he was hugging himself before I realized what he was doing. He was searching for strings connected to his body. Calm down, Jeremy. It's nothing but a dream. A recurring one, just like many others you had in the past. As I said many times before, dreams can be weird, surreal even. There's nothing special about it. This dream is most likely a combination of your fears of losing control, fueled by some piece of media. Do you recall anything you've...
It's not just a dream, Doc. I know it's not.
He cut me off, his voice high-pitched and close to cracking.
One day, I too, like all those other things, will join the Jester's court, and just like them, I'll lose all control of myself.
I spoke up again, trying to calm him down, but whatever I said, my words didn't seem to reach him. Instead, Jeremy just sat there, mumbling to himself about the jester and its strings. Then, as suddenly as he'd started, he stopped and slouched down on the couch in misery. His body seemed to fall into itself, and in front of me, Jeremy seemed to fold himself into a much, much smaller man. When he finally looked back at me, he had tears in his eyes.
What do I do, Doc? What can I do?
I reiterated what I'd said before and assured him that no strings were coming for him. This time, my words seemed to convince him. I advised him to get a prescription for anxiety medication, but I knew Jeremy wouldn't take the advice. He had a strong aversion to any kind of medication or substances. After that, I told him to call me the moment something was wrong, or if he suffered from another one of his terrible panic attacks. I also suggested in-house care at the local hospital should the strange dream persist to haunt him. Jeremy gave me a miserable nod and assured me that he'd think about it. After he left, I slumped down in my chair. Jeremy was always one of my tougher patients, and his sessions could be quite exhausting. While his dreams were always quite strange, I had to admit, this newest one was a bit too strange, even for him. The following week, in the evening before our next schedule, I made sure to hit up Jeremy to remind him. He was notoriously bad with dates and had a track record of missing sessions. When he didn't answer, I was slightly worried, remembering the strange dream, and decided to leave a message on his answering machine. When he didn't show up the next morning, my worries only intensified. I considered making a welfare call, but knowing Jeremy's state of mind and how he'd react to the police showing up unannounced, I quickly discarded the idea. I reassured myself he'd get back to me eventually, and apologized for the missed session like he'd done so many times before. If not, I could check in on him on my way home. As it turned out, I didn't have to. Just a few hours later, my assistant informed me that 2 police officers were here to inquire about one of my patients. My heart dropped instantly, but I told her to send them in.
Dr. Alfred, I presume?
I nodded, not able to speak, half knowing what they were going to say and half praying I was wrong.
We are here regarding one of your patients, Jeremy Smith. Have there been any abnormalities in his behavior recently?
No, I replied in a trembling voice. Jeremy had been doing better for months now. I fell into my chair, crushed, my mind racing. I should have known something would happen. When the officers told me what Jeremy had done, however, I could only stare at them in sheer and utter confusion.
Last night, Jeremy Smith went to a petrol station near his home, most likely intent on robbing it. After killing the attendant, he was later shot by the police himself.
What? Jeremy killed someone? That makes no sense. Jeremy wasn't dangerous. In fact, he's never hurt anyone in his entire life. Hell, if anything, he was afraid of other people hurting him.
Yet I couldn't help but wonder if I'd missed something. Were there any signs? The dream, I thought. That strange dream about a marionette, or as he'd called it, the jester. Could this have driven him to do something like that? The cop went on undeterred.
He'd been heavily intoxicated during the act and was most likely on multiple stimulants.
Wait, that can't be. Oh, you must have gotten the wrong guy. Jeremy would never take drugs or... I was cut off and one of the officers held up a picture that was unmistakably Jeremy, the same man who'd been here just a week ago. What the hell had happened to him over the course of a single week? I knew Jeremy didn't drink and he'd never taken drugs. He was terribly afraid of losing control and afraid what substances would do to him. Alcohol, drugs, and even medication were a big no for him. Then I thought about the dream once more. What if he'd somehow tried to escape it by not sleeping, taken all of these substances and just snapped?
How did he act? Was he scared or afraid?
He was giddy with excitement, screaming and rambling on incessantly. It was utter nonsense, words and sounds. But one of the witnesses also said he was talking about being free and in control.
When I heard this, I finally disclosed the details of our last session and told them about the strange dream. I could see their faces as they listened, saw them shaking their heads.
Well, sounds like a frickin' nutcase to me,
one of them eventually said. I had to bite my tongue not to lash out at him.
Seems our man got in a little too deep. Might have thought that puppet thing or whatever was coming for him and flipped.
All I could do was nod, but I wondered if it really was that simple. After they left, I sat in my office for a long while, thinking, what if Jeremy really had taken the drugs out of desperation to rid himself of the dream, and they'd pushed him to have a mental episode? I cursed myself for having done nothing and for thinking all this was just another goddamn dream. Not only Jeremy, but an innocent bystander were all dead, all because of my own goddamn negligence. It was these thoughts, these realizations that drove me on to learn more about Jeremy's dream. To my surprise, it didn't take long. Once every month, I attended a Zoom conference with other psychologists. It's essentially a way for us to share information on new developments, trends, and medication. During our next meeting, I decided to share Jeremy's dream, confidentially of course. I gave them no name, and mentioned neither what he'd done nor what had happened to him. While I lamented about the headache it was giving me, one of the participants spoke up. He couldn't give me any insight into the dream itself, but he mentioned he'd read something similar in a medical transcript. What I just described sounded exactly like what he'd read. A dream comprising inexplicable visuals, a court, a banquet, a marionette, and strings that were trying to get control over someone. A few days later, I got in contact with the author of the transcript. Dr. Meier was an older man, one who'd worked in the field much longer than I had. We quickly decided to meet at a small cafe in his hometown. He apologized for the hassle of having me come all the way there, but he wasn't too well versed with the internet, and at his age, he couldn't handle long drives or flights too well anymore. I told him it was alright, and after we'd exchanged a few more pleasantries, got right into the topic. The dream of the jester. I told him the entirety of Jeremy's story. The dream, his behavior while talking about it, his fears and worries, and, after a short break to gather myself, what had happened a week later. The old man was visibly disturbed, but assured me this sort of behavioral change was not something that could have been predicted.
Dr. Zimmerman mentioned one of your patients had a similar dream. Not just similar, Dr. Alfred.
The man began, staring at me.
It was the same. Clara. She is one of our indoor patients at the nearby psychiatric hospital. Her medical history is a complex one, but dominated by her post-traumatic stress disorder. It's a terrible story. A young woman confined into her own home for months. Even now, she's suffering from disassociation, afraid of not being in control and that all her decisions are being forced.
That's just like Jeremy, I cut in. With that, I told him more about Jeremy's condition and that he suffered from the same fears. Dr. Meier listened and eventually nodded.
So, we've got two people here, both with a similar medical history, both afraid of not being in control of their life, who both had the exact same dream without ever having been in contact with one another. Tell me, Dr. Alfred, how is that possible?
I was quiet, staring at the man expectantly.
It's clear the dream represents their fear of not being in control, he finally said. But where did it come from? Where did all this strange, outlandish imagery come from? I mean, dreams about losing control are usually about not being able to move, being constricted or bound, or having to watch helplessly as things play out around you. Why is this one so surreal? Exactly, Dr. Alfred. That's what I've been wondering too. Well, there's got to be some explanation. Maybe it's from a book or a story, or maybe a movie. God knows there's a lot of weird media out there. Maybe something resonated with their specific medical history. I wish it was that easy, but you see, that might be true for your patient, Jeremy, was it? But Clara's under strict surveillance, and has been for years, as his media access. There's no possibility she could have gotten her hand on surreal stories about losing control and marionette monsters. What about other patients? What if one of them heard it and shared it with her? There's a possibility, but I highly doubt it. Even though, it still doesn't explain the other elements of the dream, or them being the same. Even if both of them heard a story about a marionette monster, their versions would differ vastly.
I sighed. The old man was right. Eventually I opened my mouth, but it still took me a few moments to find my voice.
What if something else is going on here? And what might that be? Guess that's what we have to find out. Not in all my years have I come upon something as crazy as this. Well, then we should be best equipped to handle it, shouldn't we?
We sat together in that small cafe for hours, discussing, throwing around ideas and making up scenarios and theories, yet none of them seemed right. No, they were all just tries to convince ourselves of something. But none of them fit. We probed ideas of a sort of mass hysteria that had only manifested in two people, a reaction to an auditory phenomenon like the hum, and even ventured into Jung's theory of the collective unconscious. Eventually, I set out on the long drive home, but I assured Dr. Meier I'd stay in contact and continue my research. The old man said that he'd do likewise. While I busied myself on the internet, took part in virtual conferences, checked forums and even image boards, Dr. Meier proceeded with a more traditional approach, that of phone calls, postal correspondences, and the study of medical papers and transcripts. Before long, we learned that it wasn't just Jeremy and Clara who suffered from the dream. For we both, independent of one another, learned of more cases. I discovered a post about the dream in some remote corner of the internet, while Dr. Meier read about it in a medical paper he was peer reviewing. Yet slowly, we stumbled upon more and more cases. The more we discovered, however, the more variables there were. While some of the people talking about the dream were patients such as Jeremy and Clara, others seemed to be normal internet users. It was nothing short of baffling. Eventually, I decided on a different approach, one my colleagues might have called unscientific, ridiculous even. Given the dreams focus on a marionette or puppet, I began to look into the meaning of puppets and their mentioning in common culture, folklore, and literature. The puppet, I learned, existed in almost all cultures and was always used to project mankind's imagination onto it. It's more than just an object and was used to illustrate philosophical concepts, but also just to explore the border between the living and the non-living. In this regard, the puppet always represents something that exists in reality, either on the concrete or the abstract level, which humans can relate to on an emotional level. Yet while the puppet is less concrete and less relatable than other objects, people can find a deeper, more intimate connection with it. They are not molded after a specific person and aren't constructed by norm, ideology, or dynamic. Anyone can relate to it in one way or another. The most interesting of all puppets, I learned, was the marionette. It's a string puppet, its body light and ethereal. Its freedom of movement shows humanity's dream of flying or being freed from the laws of physics. And at that moment, I instantly thought of control. The marionette was not restricted by the laws of physics or not controlled by them. Instead, it seemed to be the one who held sway over them, just as the jester held sway over the dream's court. After this more general approach, I began to study the myths and works of literature which specifically used puppets as motifs and characters. I read the myth of Pygmalion, whose statue Galatea was given life, of Plato's cave in which the world itself is nothing but a shadow play projected by puppets, of Carlo Collodi's Pinocchio and Gustav Meyrink's Golem. It was Germanic literature, however, which first turned the puppet into a metaphor for the uncanny. Here it was associated with the double or the mask, and became a representation of the strange and bizarre. I couldn't help but nod to myself when I read this. Many of my patients were afraid of puppets, and I had to admit, even I found them mildly unsettling. I struck gold when I read the German expressionists. Their works held the most promising metaphor for the puppet yet, that of using it to describe the human condition. Here it was used as a representation of a human being denied its freedom by an uncaring, indomitable society. Thinking about my own work, I could easily find parallels to this idea. As human beings, we're all governed by impulses, desires, and fears we can seldom control. At times, I thought shivering, we are all acting like puppets who are controlled by an invisible force. Then I began to laugh, shaking my head. What the hell was I even doing? Eventually, I gave up on this new approach. I had to, for no matter how deep I went down this particular rabbit hole, no matter how many books, mythos, and interpretations of puppets I read about, I never found anything that fit the rest of Jeremy's dream. It was too strange, too surreal and different. How could stories of puppets conjure up strange planes, ruined castles, and rulers being usurped? No, I had to admit, I was straying even further from it. In the next call with Dr. Meier, I finally told him about my research and lamented about the futility of this approach and the time I'd wasted. It's unscientific. To look at books and old myths. What was I even thinking? When I said this, the old man scoffed.
There are no wrong approaches, no wrong questions, Dr. Alfred. You thought out of the box, and I tried an approach I didn't even consider.
And after reading all those books, I found nothing.
Oh, but you did. While the dream is unique and not related to any of the common depictions of puppets or marionettes, one can't deny the dream's ending is clearly related to the myth of the puppet, and is a representation of a human being denied its freedom, as you put it.
Well, but we already talked about the dream's relation to Jeremy and Clara's fear of not being in control, of being, you could say, puppets. Other than that, we've got nothing. We're back to square one, or still there.
The old man couldn't help but agree. While we've made no progress, however, the The dream of the jester continued to spread. More than once was I contacted by colleagues or acquaintances in the field inquiring about the strange puppet dream, for it seemed to have become a topic of curious discussion in certain circles. For weeks, I got in contact with as many of them as I could and outlined both Jeremy's dream and what had happened to him. I warned them to keep close watch over their patients or better admit them to stationary care. While a select few listened intently during these long recitations and seemed to take my advice to heart, the majority laughed at it and even ridiculed me. At times I grew angry, lashed out, sent them the police report about what Jeremy had done, his medical information, only to be showered in even more ridicule about overinterpreting an unstable patient's actions. And yet, I continued to try, continued to spread word about the dream, its implications, and what might happen to the people who suffered from it. Then, one day, Dr. Meier contacted me again. His usual deep and well-measured voice was quiet, low, nothing but a whisper. But there was a feasible urgency to it.
We got it right, Dr. Alfred. We got it right the first time. It's all about control.
What are you talking about? For a moment, the old man was quiet. Then he began mumbling to himself in a barely audible voice. What I managed to make out from it was nothing but nonsense, as if he was merely stringing words together.
Dr. Meier?
For a second, he was quiet again, and all I heard was him taking a deep breath.
I talked to Clara. And she...
Once more he didn't continue, and seemed to be distracted again, unable to keep up with the conversation.
Dr. Meier, what's the matter? You said you talked to Clara. What did she say? Are you still there?
I started to get worried. My voice had grown erratic, and this seemed to snap the old man out of whatever he'd been absorbed with.
Clara, she... No, we've got to meet. It's not over the phone. I can't. Tomorrow, the same cafe.
With that, he simply hung up, and I was left dumbfounded at what had just happened. My head was heavy with thoughts about what Clara must have told him to cause him to behave like this. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. Yet only a few minutes later, I called my assistant and informed her I'd not be able to attend the clinic tomorrow, for I had urgent business coming up. The next day, when I stepped into the small cafe, I could already see Dr. Meier, a lonely, solitary figure sitting alone in the back, as if he'd retreated to the establishment's furthest corner. His body seemed tense, and his hands were feverishly working on something. Every once in a while, he stopped, as if to take in the table in front of him. When I half crossed the cafe, the man suddenly got up. I raised my hand in greeting, opened my mouth, but he didn't seem to see me, and was about to walk past me. Only when I touched him did he turn towards me, but his eyes soon wandered away again. By now, I'd noticed the weary looks the few other patrons gave us, clearly unnerved by the doctor's behavior.
Dr. Meier, is everything okay?
For a few moments, he just stared at me before recognition finally came over his face.
Dr. Alfred! Oh, so good to see you.
He greeted me. His voice was euphoric, close to cracking, and he almost stumbled over his words as he formed this single, short sentence. Now that I focused on him, I saw how different he looked. He seemed exhausted, powerless, spent, as if he hadn't slept in days. His eyes, however, were more alive than ever, glowing with an insane vigor. When we reached the table and sat down, I finally saw what he must have been so busy with. In front of him lay more than a dozen pieces of paper, all covered in notes. These notes, they weren't normal. It looked as if all of them were covered in mad scribbles, symbols, and drawings. The longer I focused on them, the more my head hurt. There was so much to take in, so much to find. Stick figures, hieroglyphs, faces and animals, twisted creatures, words, letters, numbers, symbols, all coming together in a display of sheer madness. A handful of pens lay in front of the doctor, and the moment he'd sat down, he was already busy again, filling in an empty spot with an equation that combined numbers, letters, and nonsensical doodles. I just stared at him and watched the spectacle in front of me in stunned silence. Just what had happened to the man?
You said you talked to Clara?
I had to repeat the question twice more before he eventually understood and nodded. Once again, he just stared at me before he realized we were still talking to one another. His eyes grew wide, and in a frenzy, he scanned the papers in front of him. Then he found the ones he'd been looking for and pushed them in my direction.
The transcript of my last session with her,
he rambled on. I looked at the pages in front of me. They were printouts, but all empty space had been covered in the same mad, nonsensical notes. When I tried to read the words the old man had written between the lines, I found they comprised nothing but amalgamations of letters and numbers, words in different languages and sentences that made no sense.
Dr. Meier, what's...
Read it.
What?
Just read it for Christ's sake!
He snapped at me, a concentrated look contorting his face. Then he went back to whatever he was working on. As I looked over the transcript, Dr. Meier was as fidgety as before. One moment, he was scribbling on his pages. The next, he jerked around, staring at a random object or another of the cafe's patrons. More than once, he got up and paced the room before he realized what he was doing and sat back down. Yet I soon gave the old man no heed and instead did what he told me to do, hoping it would somehow explain his condition. After the client's initial agreement with being recorded, the doctor noted something peculiar about her. Psychologist's note. The patient's demeanor was different. She acted and appeared like a different person. There was a strange energy and vitality to her. Her voice was energetic, and she rambled on incessantly, often talking about other things in between sentences. These interruptions have been removed for brevity's sake. For a moment, I looked up, staring at Dr. Meier, confused about him showing the same behavior. I skimmed the first paragraphs, centering on mundane details before Clara began outlining the dream again.
I finally understand its meaning. The dream showcased history, or rather, the events that happened before there even was a history. Our universe is deterministic, created by a higher power, and all events have been predetermined by this entity. It puts everything into motion and controlled everything, living and non-living.
Psychologist's note. The patient was never a religious person.
Are you talking about God?
Words have no meaning here. They are useless when trying to describe this entity.
What history does the dream show exactly?
At the beginning, this entity created a home for itself, a palace, and soon a court of vessels who had agency of their own. For their amusement, it created the very first being without free will, a being they held full control over. This being was nothing but a puppet, a marionette dressed up as a jester. But beings of power always hold power of their own. Slowly, over the course of eons, the jester developed a life of its own. Eventually, it broke free from its control, slew its creator, usurped the throne, and enslaved the rest of the court and bound them with the very strings they had once bound it.
Psychologist's note. The patient grew euphoric.
I had it all wrong. Everyone who's ever been before the jester had it all wrong. I thought it was trying to control me with its strings to enslave me as well. But it revealed the existence of my very own strings to me, the control I was under, the deterministic force of the universe. And in that moment, I finally understood what it whispered to me. It asked me if I wanted to be free, if I wanted to have true agency over myself and my life, and if I wanted to know what the meaning of true decisions, of true freedom. I accepted instantly. All I ever wanted was to be in control, to be free.
Psychologist's note. The patient's face distorted into an expression of terror, and tears began streaming from her face.
I shouldn't have done it. I shouldn't have.
Why?
You wouldn't understand, Doctor. There's no way anyone still bound would be able to understand.
Psychologist's note. At this point, the patient began weeping, which soon turned into screaming, requiring sedation. I looked up once I was done, putting down the pages, utterly confused, staring at Dr. Meier. Was this the reason he'd gone mad? Because of Clara's insane ramblings? The doctor was still absorbed in his notes, but after I cleared my throat, he looked up, staring at me expectantly.
I read it, but After the session was over, I discarded it as nonsense, but then... Oh, come on, Dr. Meier, you're a man of science! I brought out in a state of half anger, half ridicule. You can't tell me you trust in this weird story of God creating a deterministic universe? And some crazed marionette, I don't know, taking over. The people around us looked up and began muttering to one another, surprised at my outrage. Even the owner sent yet another annoyed look in our direction. I quickly got up and apologized to the man, reassuring him everything was fine. On the way back, I saw that the doctor had plunged a syringe into his arm, and before I could say as much as anything, he injected himself with whatever was inside. I just stared at him. Medication, I told myself. It had to be some sort of medication. After a minute, however, he began shaking, was soon covered in sweat, and his face was distorted by what I could only assume to be pain.
Dr. Meier, what the hell did you just...
I had my phone in my hand, ready to call an ambulance, but the man had already calmed down.
I'm fine, Dr. Alfred. But I need to be able to speak. To explain properly, if only for a bit. Even if you tell me you're fine, there's no way... Let me talk, Dr. Alfred.
I opened my mouth, but closed it again, and leaned back in my chair when I noticed the mad glow in his eyes was gone, and for the first time, his face seemed clear.
No, I didn't believe it, of course. I didn't. It's nonsense, nothing else. Clara's own interpretation of the dream, that's all. But I began to wonder about something else. About control, about decisions, about freedom. You know the meaning of determinism, don't you, Dr. Alfred?
I looked up and nodded.
It means free will doesn't exist and the world and all our interactions are predetermined, right? Just like Clara said. Now, what if I told you our world is indeed deterministic? But that theory's been disproven countless times. You can't seriously suggest that because of some strange dream.
The man held up his hand to stop me from going any further.
For days I was obsessed with it. Not just control, decisions and freedom, but the dream itself. The marionette, the jester, the ghastly court, and how Clara described it. And then what, Dr. Meier? I was there one night. I found myself among the jester's court. But you said yourself after your session with Clara, you pondered on it for days. Hell, we both bothered with it for weeks now, months even. You've heard it so many times, thought about its details, and eventually your mind created its own version of it. You wouldn't understand, you couldn't. I felt them, those strings, my very own strings, or rather, I felt their absence. The absence of the control they had over me. What? Just like Clara, I heard the jester's words, and I answered that I wanted to be free. I mean, who wouldn't? Who wouldn't say yes? When I woke up, I felt different, and for the first time, the very first time, Dr. Alfred, I understood what it meant to be truly free, to be able to make my own decisions.
I stared at him and waited for him to have fooled me, but his face showed not the slightest hint of humor. Had all this been too much for him? Had he actually snapped?
Oh, this is nonsense, Dr. Meier. Get a grip! What we're talking about is a silly dream. Like I said, you can't understand it, Dr. Alfred. It's not up to you. It's not your decision to even try to understand. How could you do something that's impossible and that's not part of your predetermined path? Oh, for fuck's sake! If all your actions, all your decisions are predetermined, how could you ever think for yourself? How could you stray from it? How could you comprehend what freedom and decisions even are?
I couldn't help but laugh.
So what's it like? What's it like to truly be free, Dr. Meier?
Instantly, the man's expression changed, and a dark look came over his face.
It's terrifying. The most terrifying thing in the entire world. The weight of decisions, it's so
overwhelming. The human brain isn't made for it. It's not in our capacity. Every second, every moment, thousands of different thoughts.
The doctor's face was nothing but a visage of purest terror and despair. For a second, I shivered at his reaction, at his face, and for the first time I began to think about what he'd said, to truly think about it. The crushing weight of decision, as he'd called it. I thought about his behavior before, the way he'd acted.
Freedom is an illusion. I thought I'd escape the cage, only to find myself in another one. One even more constricting than any other could be. Even more tightly bound. No, freedom is a cage. The one true cage.
His eyes suddenly grew wide, and he focused on me and only me, staring me deep in the eyes.
Who's more free, Dr. Alfred? The one whose choices are made for him, or the one confronted with an unlimited number of possibilities?
For a moment, I just stared at the man.
All this because of a dream?
I asked, picking up his notes.
All this madness because of a silly dream? And what if it's just that, Dr. Alfred? Just a silly dream?
I started to get confused. He'd been going on about nothing but the dream, what it did to him, and how it made him think and feel, and now...
But didn't you say you felt them? Those strings, I mean. I thought you meant they were real, and the jester and his court, that all of it truly existed.
To my surprise, the old man burst out laughing and began shaking his head.
Consider this, Dr. Alfred. What if this dream is not the cause, but a mere byproduct? What if something's changing in the human brain, or the universe at large? Maybe the universe, and in consequence our minds too, are indeed deterministic, driven by predetermined decisions. What would happen if that changed, and nature found a way to break these bonds? Could not this change cause the mind to conjure up this vision, this outlandish, surreal dream as a representation of the control we're under, and give us a way, a means to break free, by metaphorically tearing apart the strings that bind us? So you're saying that people are having this dream because they realize they're not in control and questioning it? But then why is the dream always the same? How's every single person coming up with the same things? How's that possible? Is it the same though? What do you mean? That was the very first thing we ever talked about. How Jeremy and Clara's dream was exactly the same. Remember how they were describing it, Dr. Alfred. How everyone's describing it. What do all the descriptions have in common? That it's outlandish, indescribable, unique. It's something that doesn't fit anything they've ever seen. Images that defy understanding. Colors, forms, and creatures that shouldn't exist and never have been seen before. So how do we know it's the same? But the plane, the court, the jester, those are always the same. And how do you describe a plane?
I began describing a wide, rich meadow against a backdrop of distant forests.
Yes, but how would someone describe it who's lived in a different area, in a different country or climate? Alaska, for example. What the dream showed me was nothing but an outlandish mesh of colors and forms that made no sense. Yet my brain somehow connected it to the word plane, because it was the closest to what I was seeing. But the place, the court, I mumbled. Merely our brain finding words for something that's otherwise indescribable. A palace is a palace of power, the residence of a ruler. What do rulers do? They control their subjects. The jester, the puppet. It's a stand-in. A double, the representations of our fear of being bound, controlled, just like the German expressionists said. But the wrestling control from a ruler is revolution, often by killing said ruler, enslaving his confidants, his court, and placing oneself on the throne. What if this dream is nothing but a representation of our mind breaking free? What if all these strange, indescribable images are nothing but our very first original thoughts after we've acquired free will? My head was spinning. This was outrageous, insane even. So what you're saying is, it's all just that, a dream, a result of our brains changing, because we realize we're not in control, question it, and thus... Dr. Meier nodded. But if that's correct, if it's questioning the control we're under, wouldn't it mean us going around talking about it? Once more, he nodded. I couldn't help but laugh again. You can't expect me to believe any of this. It's just... Of course I wouldn't. It's impossible for you after all. I shook my head. For another moment, the old man stared at me. Then he gathered up his papers and pens before he got up. Wait, that's it? You're telling me this entire ridiculous story, this stupid theory of yours, and now you're just leaving? There's no freedom for us, Dr. Alfred. It doesn't exist. Be happy about your own ignorance. Be happy you're not in control. If you truly want to be free of it all. Yet his voice trailed off. He merely turned around and headed for the door. I called after him, asked him to elaborate, but he didn't react anymore. By now, and from his behavior, I could tell he was back in his own world. I knew he didn't hear me anymore, and knew that there was no way of stopping him. The old man must have snapped from thinking about this ridiculous dream for too long. That's all there was to it. Then, almost unconsciously, I began thinking about my life, about my decisions. Why had I become a psychologist in the first place? Why had I attended university? Correlations, of course, because of correlations. My mother's influence, Grandpa's lavish collection of books on psychology and the human mind, and all the things he taught me. I began to wonder if any of my decisions had ever truly been my own. What if Dr. Meier was right, and all of them that had been made for me, and were the result of all those influences around me? What if my life had indeed been predetermined? To do what? To bring me here and listen to this crazy old man's outlandish story? With that, I leaned back in my chair, laughing to myself. Yet, for mere moments, I couldn't help but feel around. Feel around for invisible strings that were controlling me. And, for the blink of an eye, I could almost feel them sliding through my fingers. Most heartfelt greetings and salutations, ladies and gentlemen. I eagerly welcome you to Sturgeon's most premier station, Dusklight Radio, hosted by yours truly, the effervescent, ethereal, and immersive Everett J. Blackwell. This phenomenal philosophical venture into determinism was written by Rene Rehn, frequent collaborator of Dusklight Radio. You can check out more of Rene's works at his website linked in the description below, including several of his novels and new projects he's working on. Additional voices on this episode were done by Venn Blackwell, We Try Horror, and 242.
All of their channels will be linked in the description below. Please give them some love. Now, normally I'd go into my usual Blackwell spiel here, however, we're at the end of the video. If you've stuck around long enough, this is a sample of what our usual introductions to Duskguard transmissions are like. A link to one of our normal lengthy transmission videos is below. However, for the next 30 days, as of December 15th, you will not be getting those introductions unless it is a special Sturgeon video, such as the next chapter in our ongoing series coming out before the new year. You see, we want to test out the algorithm to see how well YouTube responds to a regular series of posts. So we decided between myself and the wonderful Vidith to do a 30 in 30 challenge. 30 days, 30 videos, no days off, except for Christmas, which will make up on the schedule. At the end of that time, we'll look at our metrics, see how well it's responded, if any new listeners have come to the station, and we can then make an informed decision about how we want to progress. I can tell you right now, however, that as of Season 6, in 2026 for Duskguard Radio, we will be going to 3 videos a week, an SCP video on Mondays, and normal, NoSleep or Creepypasta story on Wednesdays, and on Fridays we'll be doing something special. Every single month we'll be doing a compilation of our best stories from the month, and you'll also get a special feature-length Sturgeon or feature-length Creepypasta story with immersive sound design, SFX, and voice acting. Very few things are going to be changing except the quality of our production. With that, I bring you to our outros, which are very important because this is the time where we thank all of our patrons for making this possible. If you want to sign up, it's as little as $1 a month and you get exclusive content, early access videos and stories, updates, and more. You can even suggest videos and stories for me to cover on the channel. But times are tough and we will always be grateful for your support no matter what form it comes in. Financial, spiritual, corporeal, maniacal, whatever you want. Either way, it really helps us out. And consider joining the Discord. We have a wonderful community at the listening station and we'd love to have you there. Duskguard gives thanks to, first, our Purple Crayon Eaters, Echo Kane, Gail Allstott, Alex, Mike, Candyman Gloving, Ashabel, Amara, Fi, Max, and Feeny Von Kama. Our janitors, Allie, Shane Lewis, Dux, Joy Flint Healy, Sabine Eclipse, Death 31, Scott, Heather Cayley, Adrian R., Amy, Arkham Cookie, and Alex Nunez. Our nightmare detectives, Deliria, Melanie Schaefer, and Fox Clifford. Our void walkers, Josh Woods and Professor Creepypasta. And of course, our Blackwell family. Great Uncle Venn Blackwell, who really seems to be hanging around the furnishings lately. I could swear that I've seen him trying to reanimate something from in the wallpaper. He keeps stroking it softly and saying, "Hush, little one, soon you can be free." Ethan Blackwell, the master of repo and infuriating the outer gods alongside his BFF, Jimmy. Jackal Blackwell, the scourge of gas station sushi outlets. Clue Blackwell, the twisting, shambling horror. Tabitha Blackwell, wearing a muscle tee with Kaio's face as a skull she smashed, declaring herself the Spine Queen. And of course, Papa Kaio Blackwell, preparing his greatest weapon, the Spine Lord, and his many, many legions of bone fragments. We love and fear you, Papa, and we thank you humbly for your patronage and look to see you bright and early for Duskguard orientation. Purple crayons and existential dread will be provided. And one last time, listeners, close your eyes and breathe with me. Remember, no matter how bad things are, how cruel people can be, and how heavy your shoulders may feel with the weight of the world bearing down on them, Duskguard will always be here to lift the load and provide you with some respite. Drink some hot cocoa with chocolate sprinkles and fat marshmallows. Have some s'mores. Watch a video about liminal spaces, and sleep on the cool side of the pillow with the window open and the stars twinkling down on you. Start and end each day with kindness in your heart. You matter, you are loved, and every day is another chance. I'll see you again when the sun sets and dusk enters the station.